Hello, you beautiful people. So, after what feels like a million years, we finally got the first beta kit of Castorice, and I'm guessing you're here because you're really interested in her just like me and want to know what she does right? Well, luckily for you, you've managed to somehow land on the perfect video to get that info. Today, I'm mainly going to go over her entire kit in detail along with the multipliers and just a little warning. Her kit probably has the most amount of text that I've ever seen in a kit, and some of you guys might get a little bit confused on some parts, but don't worry. I'll try my best to break down her kit for you as well as I can. I've also included some timestamps in the video, so if you're interested in any particular part of her kit, then you can simply skip to that part using these timestamps. Before we go on though, if you're planning to pull for any of the new characters, you might want to check out Lubar because on this site you can save up to a total of 23% on all your purchases. To give an example, I'll buy this 3280 Oniric Shard pack for $43, and this same pack costs me about $50 from the in-game shop. You can see that it's cheaper, right? The top-up process is honestly really easy as well because all you need to do is enter your UID in this box and choose your respective server depending on your account. After waiting for a few minutes, I received my Jades with the double top-up bonus because it was my first purchase and saved a decent amount of money. Other than HSR, you can top up on Genshin as well using Lubar, and both of these games have quite a lot of 5-star reviews. Lastly, if you use my link which is in the description or the pinned comment, you can get an extra 8% off on top of all the other discounts. With that done, let's move on and finally take a detailed look at Castorice's kit. Honestly, her kit is truly something special, and she definitely takes the prize for the most complicated kit in the entire game, where she uses tons of mechanics we've never seen before. Alright, we're actually gonna start with her talent first, because I feel like you'll understand her kit way better this way. So, her talent is really the first of its kind, because the initial part of it features her Stamen Nova mechanic. Don't pay too much attention to the name of this mechanic though, because it's just a fancy name for the way that she charges her ultimate. Basically, the cap of this mechanic is based on 100 times the sum of all character levels on the battlefield, and I know that was somewhat confusing, but what I'm trying to say here is that this mechanic takes all the levels of the characters present on the field, combines them together, and then multiplies that by 100, so the final amount should be 32,000 in a regular team of level 80 characters. Yep, Castorice gains charge of Stamen Nova for every point of HP lost by allies, and this means that the more HP she can drain from her teammates, the faster she can gain these Stamen Nova charges. At last, whenever Castorice has max charge of Stamen Nova, she gains access to her ultimate, but we'll discuss more on that later on in the video. She also gains a decent damage boost whenever she gains charge of Stamen Nova, by the way, which is stackable and lasts for 3 turns, so this should be really easy to maintain at max stacks. Now, you're probably left wondering how she drains this HP from her allies to gain these Stamen Nova charges, right? Well, her skill is her main way of gaining Stamen Nova, as this ability consumes 40% of the current HP from all her allies present on the field. And this is honestly quite crazy to think about, but it is necessary to fulfill the requirements for her ultimate. In a regular or a very basic team, this should get Castorice a pretty good amount of her total required charge, which just means that she should be able to use her ultimate in only a few uses of her unenhanced skill. Additionally, Castorice also deals quantum damage in a blast-type radius whenever she uses this version of her skill, and this damage scales off her max HP. Also, just like most of the other HP-draining abilities, if her teammates don't have enough HP, her skill won't directly reduce their HP to 0, and instead of that, it will set their max HP to a huge total of 1. Now what if I tell you, this is just the unenhanced version of her skill, and whenever she summons her Memosprite on the field after using her ultimate, her skill automatically gets enhanced, dealing way more damage and joint attacks. But that is a topic which we'll discuss after taking a look at her ultimate first. Seeing as I just mentioned it, her ultimate is where things actually get interesting in her kit, and in a way, this is probably the main core that her entire kit is based on. Firstly, upon using her ultimate, she summons her Memosprite called Dead Dragon and advances its action forward by 100%, meaning that her Memosprite will take an action as soon as it is summoned on the field. Now secondly, her ultimate also creates a special terrain on the field, and this terrain is kind of crazy because it reduces the all-type resistance of all the enemies by a total of 20%. Honestly, an all-type resistance penetration is one of the best buffs in the game, and I think now you know why I just said that her ultimate's terrain is kind of crazy, right? By the way, her Memosprite also shares the buffs that she gets from her talent, meaning that its damage is increased heavily, and we all know that this thing is going to deal an insane amount of damage. Funnily enough, contrary to the old info that we got on her kit, her dragon is actually quite fast, having a 140 base speed, so it will be able to act pretty often. At last, after her dragon acts for a total of 3 times, or if its HP falls down to 0, it disappears and dispels the terrain on the battlefield. Now, remember how I mentioned that her skill automatically gets enhanced once she uses her ultimate? Well, if you thought that the 40% current HP drain on her normal skill was crazy, you might get a little bit shocked when you hear that upon using her enhanced skill, Castorice drains a total of 50% current HP from all her allies present on the field. Now, after draining this HP, she along with her Memosprite launches a joint attack which deals quantum damage in an AoE type radius, and of course, this damage scales off her max HP. I honestly kind of wish her enhanced skill did more than just dealing damage and draining HP, because at this point, this HP drain is only useful for keeping the damage stacks that she gets from her talent. By the way, I think I forgot to mention that while her dragon is on the field, Castorice cannot gain any charge of her Stamen Nova stacks, and I guess now it probably makes way more sense why I said that the HP drain from her enhanced skill isn't really that useful, right? Next up, some of you might know that I usually discuss a character's technique at the very end of their kit summary, but I think her technique deserves a special spot, considering that it's a really good one. So, her technique is very similar to our last anniversary character, which was obviously Acheron, as her technique basically insta-kills all the normal or the non-elite enemies that steps into her field, which is very fitting for her character. Additionally, using her technique makes her Memosprite active in battle without even using her ultimate, but it does have 2 slight drawbacks though, because her Memosprite only starts at 50% of its max HP. And Castorice will also consume 40% current HP of all her allies as soon as she enters a battle. Alright, if you thought we were done there, you'd be heavily mistaken, as we still have to go through her Memosprite's abilities, or in simple language, her Memosprite's talents. So, its first talent basically enables it to function like a damage sponge for all the allies, as it makes it so that whenever an ally takes fatal damage which reduces their HP to 0, her Memosprite will take this damage instead, but at a 500% multiplier of the original damage. This is genuinely a nice defensive utility, as you'll probably find yourself at 1 HP using Castorice way more than you'd usually like to be. Next up, its second talent increases all damage dealt by allies whenever it is summoned on the field, lasting for 2 turns and functioning as a nice damage buff. At last, her Memosprite's third talent is the most unique one, as it states that when the dragon disappears, it will explode, dealing 6 instances of quantum damage which will target random enemies on the field. Now, the multipliers for this explosion damage are really insane, and if all the hits land on the same enemy, it deals the same amount of damage as Mighty's ultimate, which is honestly crazy to think about. Her Memosprite doesn't just randomly explode though, as it has 2 other abilities or skills, one doing a small amount of quantum damage to all enemies, while the other one being a little more special, and it states that after consuming 25% of its max HP as a drawback, her Memosprite will deal massive damage to all the enemies on the field, empowering itself on each use and not ending the turn when it is used. Basically, you can use this ability up to 3 times per turn, leading up to deal an insane amount of AoE quantum damage, and her Memosprite skill is pretty much the major source of her damage. Now, before we get into her traces, I want you guys to take a look at her light cone first, as it's genuinely really good. Firstly, it increases the user's max HP, which of course is great for Castorice. Now secondly, when the wearer loses HP during their own turn, they gain an effect which allows them and their Memosprite to ignore 24% of the target's defense for 2 turns. Her light cone is already one of the strongest light cones in the game, with only these 2 things being considered, but additionally, her light cone also advances the wearer's action whenever their Memosprite disappears, allowing Castorice to recover faster and summon her Memosprite again a lot easier. Finally, we're on the last topic of the video, and I want to say, just like the rest of her kit, her traces are all really strong too. Starting with her first trace, this trace gives her a 40% speed buff whenever her or her Memosprite is at 50% or higher HP, which is honestly kind of crazy. By the way, don't worry, This trace doesn't affect her ability to use the Poet set as it counts as external speed, so she still gets the max crit rate effect from that set while still benefiting from the speed buff. Now taking a look at her second trace, when her Memosprite is not on the field, healing allies will also count towards Stamen Nova charges, allowing you to benefit from strong healers like Luo Cha and Langsha. Once her Memosprite is on the field though, excess healing will start restoring HP for her Memosprite, allowing you to keep it healthy as well. At last, her final trace heals all of her allies by a little bit when her Memosprite disappears, and this allows you to have some safety when it goes away, not leaving you and your team at a massive total of 1 HP. Anyways, with that topic done, we've totally discussed her entire kit in detail, and I tried my best to explain her kit, so I really hope that you guys understood my explanation. Overall, Castorice is one of the strongest characters we've seen in a while, and I know I say this a lot, but that's because it's true. She is unique in the sense that her drawback impacts her kit way more than any other character we've seen before, but in return, she deals way more damage. And she looks like she'll be a strong character for the future too, as she has great synergy with not only Memosprite supports like Sunday, but healers too. Just want to say though, I do plan on making a lot of videos related to Castorice and Anaxa as well in the upcoming weeks, so do keep an eye out for that. If you ended up watching until the end of the video, thanks, and you might want to consider subscribing as well. With that being said, I will see you in another one.